Hi everyone, welcome to LinkCyb. LinkCyb is a platform where we will be conducting a chat sessions or interactions with cyber experts from various industries, where they will be sharing their expertises, their experiences, which will be helpful to the other professionals who are following our channel to adopt, understand, and practice these technologies and methodologies in their organizations. So to share the experience today with us, Mr. Haris Sethi is joining, who is the head of cybersecurity in AEVI. Welcome, Haris.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
So how is your day going on?
It's going very well, to be honest. It's just been another day, in the cybersecurity world. Very busy, very interesting. And as I mentioned earlier, given the fact that I'm working according to the UK and European time zone, there is still some work to do before I can call it a day today.
It's very, 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 tough, I must say. In fact, to work and to work in multiple zones, multiple country zones timing, and at the same time you have to keep your brain and mind sharpened at the same time, because you belong to cybersecurity industry, because every second something is going wrong somewhere.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. Yep.
Absolutely. And when we consider the security topic itself, everyone says, security has to be, considered from the very beginning of anything. Actually, if a project is initiated, if a development activity is initiated in any organization, from the requirement point onwards, the security has to be considered. That's what has to be, that's the standard, as per the standard. So the SDLC process, which any companies follow in their organizations, has to be well streamlined in terms of cybersecurity. So considering that fact, so you are, we know that you are been working predominantly with, DevOps and DevSecOps and all. So I think we can have a bit conversation about DevOps actually. So how good adopting a DevOps, and how adopting a DevOps in an organization can help the organization to streamline the process of development cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about it, because it's such a hot topic at the moment, DevOps or DevSecOps basically. It is something that I'm proactively working on in this moment in time in AEVI as well, right? So just to give you a little bit of the background, so I'm obviously operating in the finance industry, and I've been in the finance and cybersecurity world for many, many years now.
Hot industry.
And yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so obviously, given the situation that we've been in now for the past 2 or 2.5 years now, with COVID coming into our life, there's been a significant shift in digitalization. And there's been a significant spike as well in the number of digital payments that occur now. Whether we are talking about digital payments in the sense of using, contactless technology, like contactless wristbands or key fobs, or, your mobile phone, or even if you're talking about payments over e-commerce, online payments, for example, they've increased quite significantly, during the course of when COVID came into our life. More devices are connected to the internet now, which obviously falls under the IoT umbrella, right? And with all of this shift towards digitalization, right, there comes a significant demand as well from your standards, your guidelines. There comes demands from the market, and there comes demands as well from particular customers, if you're in the finance industry. And depending on the location where you're in as well, right? Because I've obviously been tied to many different countries, the UK, I'm born in Germany, so I've got the German payment standard in my head as well. And now I'm here in the UAE as well. Depending on where you are, the payment standard is also a local one that you have to follow, right? Now, with all these demands that are occurring, right, many financial organizations are striving to introduce a DevOps strategy. And the reason why they are striving to introduce a DevOps strategy, the main key point is speed, right? It's the speed of delivery. It's the speed at which your products are developed and services are offered. It's the speed at which organizations can solve customer challenges. It's the speed at which organizations can respond to new challenges or new requirements from customers, right? Or it can even be the speed, for you to grow in the market, so scalability. right? And with all of that, basically, it pushes organizations to optimize the DevOps strategy, okay? Because time is money, as everybody knows. So by doing everything in high speed, you can substantially increase your business, but that's only as long as your quality of the service remains the same. What you do not want to do when you introduce DevOps is that you then sacrifice your quality, right? So the speed and the quality, it really goes hand in hand. And obviously with that, there is, you know, the technological aspect, so introducing the right technologies, but it's also an educational aspect, because the people who work in your organization, they need to be familiar, they need to think, you know, this, or literally live and breathe DevOps, basically. And that happens over time, you know. It's not something that happens overnight, it's something that people need to get accustomed to over a specific period of time. So I think one of the key sort of advices, you know, that I even give to my fellow colleagues in AEVI is patience. Do not rush with your DevOps strategy. Approach it systematically and strategically, right? And obviously have your key tactical objectives that you want to achieve and your strategic objectives that you will achieve. And DevOps is something that will then grow and optimize organically over time. So that's my view today on DevOps.
Absolutely. So basically, the major factor which would be the agility of the organization, the culture of the organization, because they are already practiced and practicing on a day-to-day basis. They were having a sort of a different culture altogether in terms of that process in their organizations. Exactly. So when they switch to the DevOps culture, DevOps process culture, there will be lots of changes which will be happening and which has to be adopted slowly into their organization. Exactly. That's what your advice is. Absolutely. Completely agree. I think there's this buzzword as well that you hear quite often that is associated with DevOps, which is automation. You know, you do want to automate as much as possible, right? And basically it then causes a domino effect, right? Where one particular action then triggers another one, you know, in your DevOps chain. And again, you know, I know that many organizations I've spoken to, they're very eager and very keen to introduce DevOps. And obviously the business reason behind it is perfectly valid why they want to do so. But it's just about patience and really causing that cultural change within the organization in order to then live and breathe DevOps. Yeah, it's eventually this, you know, like slow and steady wins the race.
Eventually.
It's like when we change, you know, recently, most of the companies talk about digitalization, in fact, in their environment, digitalization, automation in their environment, actually, so that to cope up with the same topic what you said, you know, the speed of delivery, accuracy of the delivery, whatever they want to achieve for their customers and their clients, of course. So, in the DevOps itself, when we think about securing the DevOps, that overall cycle. DevSecOps actually. So how we can, you know, we understood from your wordings that the difficulty which we'll be facing, the hurdles which we'll be facing when we adopt such an environment, such a development environment in any organization. So on top of that, when you put the DevSecOps, actually, what are the challenges? You know, what will the challenges? How we have to be prepared in our organization?
That's a very good question. A very, very good question. And to be honest, whenever we have our meetings as well, so what we decide to do in AEVI is that we have regular DevOps review board meetings, right? We have got individuals from operations, technology, development, all incorporated to have this conversation and drive DevOps forward. I actually refuse to call it DevOps. I always speak as DevSecOps, obviously, given that, you know, I'm heading the cybersecurity team. So when you incorporate security, there's a very famous slogan that you hear, which is called shifting security to the left, right? And what that means is that you incorporate security as early as possible in your DevOps chain, right? Again, there is two things you have to concern yourself with. One is the technology that you use, and one is obviously the human side, the employees, the colleagues that are going to be using those technologies natively, right, as second nature. So to give you an example, right, is the earliest possible way of identifying your code is during the coding stage. So you have a developer and he's writing his code, and the earliest stage that you can potentially identify a vulnerability in your code is when you use a tool that is referred to as an IDE plugin. right? The IDE plugin shows you vulnerabilities in your code at the very instance when you're writing the code. Why is this beneficial? It's beneficial because immediately the developer can fix his code and remediate the vulnerability there and then. What it prevents is that you're running a vulnerability scanner later on down the line with a huge number of vulnerabilities, and you have to go back again to the initial stage and fix your code, right? So you're shifting security to the left, you're doing it during the coding stage. Then there are other tools that people use, right? That, other organizations who I know of, who I've spoken to, a very popular tool called static application security scanning. It's used during the build stage of an application. So in short, it's called a SAST scanner. People use, third-party library scanners, because in this day and age, applications are written and dependent on many third-party libraries as well. And it's so important in your DevOps chain that you identify the vulnerabilities as well in the third-party libraries. There was a very famous case, I'm sure you must have heard about this, with regards to the Log4j vulnerability. Many companies are suffering. Many companies suffer because of the Log4j vulnerability. Yes. It's a third party, it's a third-party tool basically. So obviously, it's very important that you scan your third-party libraries as well. And now, DevSecOps or DevOps is often associated with the cloud as well. So now what you need to think about as well are security scanners for the cloud. You're talking about Docker images now. So you need to identify vulnerabilities in your Docker images. You're using infrastructure as code. Well, guess what? You need to identify vulnerabilities in your infrastructure as code as well, right? That can be done during the testing phase. And then you have your dynamic application security scanning as well, and your penetration tests that you perform, right? And then last but not least, after you've done all these different security scans or tests on your application, then comes the continuous scanning as well. As your Docker images are running and fully operational in the environment, whether it's UAT or production, right? So not only is it about introducing security tools or scans, during the build phase or during the coding phase, the build phase and the test phase, etc., but it's also in the latter stages when your application is operational, you still continuously want to scan it for security vulnerabilities in order to remediate it. And that's how you end up with your upside down 8, or not upside down, it's the infinity symbol, the famous infinity symbol for the DevOps chain. So basically, in a nutshell, again, similar to what I mentioned earlier, it's a combination of two things. It's about identifying the right security tools in the DevOps chain. Where do you want to use them? How do you want to use them, right? And obviously, it has to be aligned with the business objective as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously the second part is the cultural change, where the developers, the DevOps engineers, the operations team, the technology team, where they use these tools as second nature, as well as the security team, obviously. Right? It has to be a second nature, and that's when you can really, have a kickstart and a good go at DevSecOps.
Absolutely, having an infinite loop of this, improvement factors is very important, I must say, because as per the statistics, minimum 50. I remember if the figure is minimum 50 vulnerabilities are being, reported on a daily basis actually. So when we consider normal, in a project development life cycle, maybe 1 month or 2 months of the life cycle, you can imagine how many vulnerabilities will be created from the infrastructure side as well as from the platform side for that project by the time it finishes it. So it's important to continuously do this scanning and improvising and closing the gaps, as you said. It's an infinite loop, absolutely. So
absolutely,
So when we adopt, these technologies, usually, how many areas are there actually? If you can just, quickly brief about this DevSecOps, the areas pass us through.
Yeah. There are definitely, there are various areas basically. The way that I like to differentiate is by the different departments, right? So I look at it from department to department. I look at the development department and I look at the tools that they will be using natively whilst they're coding. And for example, like I said, this is where you have your IDE plugin. What you want to make sure is that you want to use an IDE plugin that favors the development team. Even though it's a security tool, you want to use something that the developers are comfortable to use. Because oftentimes what can happen is if security is too adamant and too pushy and they tell you tools which are from a security perspective, the best tools that you should use, actually from the development, there can be a backlash. They would say, no, actually, even though it might be state-of-the-art security tool, it's actually not very helpful or very easy to use from a development point of view. So you need to find the right balance. Right? So I look at the development department, I look at what are the tools that they are comfortable in using. And nowadays, thank God, there are a lot of tools, security tools, associated to the development environment that comes as a plugin, as an add-on. Whether you look at Bitbucket or you look at GitHub, for example, to give you some names, they do either provide their own security scanning tools or they partner with security vendors, third-party ones, which are often state-of-the-art. So I look at the development team. Then I look obviously at my DevOps team when it comes to the Docker images, when it comes to the infrastructure as code, right? Whether you're using AWS Lambda functions or you're using Terraform. It's very important that the DevOps team also understands and utilizes tools which they can easily use. Yes, from security, we've got the requirement and we say we want to see the report. There shouldn't be any critical or high vulnerabilities, but it is very important that you emphasize and understand their world as well to make sure that they're using tools that they're comfortable to use as well, which they understand as well. Okay. Then the next department or the next section for me is the testing department, right? Your quality assurance, right? Or the dev environment. You look at them and you see what are the tools that they are comfortable in using, which then provides us with the information and the confidence and the reassurance that the vulnerabilities have been remediated. So from a security point of view, we look at the reports and we provide the recommendation of what can be done in order to remediate the vulnerability, right? Then comes your penetration testing, which is obviously our testing department, right? And then the last but not least is the operations department. Once the application is running, fully operational, we then speak to the operations team. We recommend to them the tools that they can use. Oftentimes when you're operating in the cloud, you have cloud native tools that you can use. But again, it's a perfect balance between what security recommends and what the other department is comfortable in using, right? Which they see the value in as well, in order to harmonize the departments to come together and work efficiently on DevSecOps.
So see, when you talk about these subjects, I feel like our conversation has to be part 1, part 2, part 3. Like it will not be finishing it in a single session, it seems, because that many questions are arising in the mind. Because I know, I'm working with multiple industries here. They all have lots of questions related to the DevSecOps, for sure. DevOps and DevSecOps actually they're having, which are popping in my mind. But we don't have time that much. But I'll quickly ask one doubt actually regarding the same thing. See, most of the industries, they have already a setup right now. They have their security solutions, they have their infrastructure, they have their servers, everything is ready with them actually. So when we adopt towards a DevOps SDLC, can we utilize the existing environment itself, or do we need to go for an entirely different, a new setup?
Mm-hmm. I mean, there are so many vectors and so many things that you have to consider when moving from your traditional environment into DevOps that is very difficult to provide an answer for this one, because as I already mentioned in my previous answer, there are so many different sections that are involved in DevOps. At times, your native tools, your legacy tools that you've been using, they can be perfectly reused as well for DevOps. And we've done so in AEVI as well. We reuse the tools because we thought they are a perfect fit. But again, it comes back to the fact that you have to think in your mind, in the department that you're working in. For me, it's security. What are the objectives that I have? What are my objectives in DevSecOps that I would like to achieve? Once I've got my objectives, I then go through them one by one and I look at the tools that we already have. Does it fulfill the objective that I have? Yes or no? If yes, perfect, I'll reuse it. It's going to be more cost efficient, right? Yeah. Objective number 2, do we have a tool that can achieve this? If it's a no, well, guess what? I need to find out what the gap is today. I need to do a gap analysis. I need to do a cost benefit analysis. And I need to align it to the business objective before I then go out to the market and I explore what is it that I can buy that's in the market that can help me with my DevOps strategy. But what I would suggest, my advice would be, is that it's always obviously better to fully utilize the tools that you already have today. Speak to the vendors that you already work with today, ask them about their roadmap. Maybe they have something in the future that will come in handy. Right? Utilize the tools that you have today to be as cost efficient as possible. Where you identify a gap is where you obviously do your gap analysis, your cost benefit analysis, you align it with the business need for it, and then you go out there and you buy the tools that you need to optimize your DevOps setup.
Absolutely. So that was a great point, I must say, because most of the companies, they will be having question, okay, I want to go and automate, I want to go for a faster methodology for delivering my projects. But how can I utilize the existing infrastructure, equipments itself? Because I need to invest again towards other technologies. So that question will be arising in most of the company organizations, management. So if possibility is that definitely they can do this analysis is the key, as you said. This analysis is the key to make sure that whatever is there is enough for me. Do we need to go for any other solutions? Do I need to adopt any technologies newly? All this analysis is the major key, I must say. Great.
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all about planning. I think that's what we spent the most time, and the most time that we spent was in the planning stages, right? Setting up the requirements per department, and then obviously choosing a prototype project that you want to run through your DevSecOps, chain. And you, like I said in the very beginning as well, it's something that grows organically. You have to be patient with it. You're most probably not going to get it spot on the first time around. You're going to learn from the deficiencies that you have, and then over time you grow, you optimize, and that's when your DevSecOps will perfectly fit into your organization. And I said it earlier as well, this is before we started the recording, there is not a handbook for organizations to follow step by step how to have the perfect DevSecOps setup. It really depends from organization to organization.
Perfect. I think I have to stay tuned to gather more information from your brain regarding the DevSecOps and DevOps technologies adoption, because since the time limitation is there, actually let's we definitely I hope if you can allocate some other time, we can discuss much more about DevSecOps, I believe, which will be very helpful for the viewers later.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Since you belongs to a payment industry, actually, so just want to discuss few topics related to the payment industry specifically. Actually, when we consider the payment industry, how critical when you consider the technologies which you have to adopt?
Yeah. Okay, so obviously me and you both know, and many of the people who might be listening over here, the finance or the payments industry is one of the most heavily regulated markets that is out there, because you're dealing with very sensitive information, and it's also a market that is very heavily targeted by cyber criminals, right? And so obviously given my background, so I work for various large financial institutions as well as the fact that I now work for a fintech organization. The payments market, it consists of many different components and organizations that make up the transaction chain, right? You can be a POS terminal provider, you can be a payment service provider, you can be an acquirer, you could be an e-commerce solution provider, basically. It really depends where you're sitting in the payments chain, according to which there are several guidelines or standards that you have to follow, right? As we know, the PCI SSC has got many different guidelines, PCI PTS for your POS terminals, PCI DSS, which covers many different areas, but including PSP, so e-commerce solution providers, or PADSS for payment application vendors. It really depends, where in the payments chain you're sitting in, and according to that, you obviously pick and choose the technologies that you require, right? Each one of those, whether it's PTS, DSS, PA, DSS, etc., each one of those specifies different methodologies. Basically, you can use in order to pass your audit, right, or your certification. And technologies is basically something you as an organization need to then research and implement according to the guidelines or standards that you have to adhere to, right, or according to the business vision. As for the example above, we spoke about DevSecOps, for example. I listed multiple different application security tools that you could use, right? But whether you are in payments or even in other market segments, it is important that you have a security strategy that aligns with the business objective. And the business objective obviously is a combination between the standards and the guidelines that you have to adhere to, but it might also be other objectives or visions that the company, that the organization wants to achieve. Now, you look at stuff like data protection, data storage, network requirements, network protection, hardware security modules. There are so many different technologies that you require. It's the importance of understanding where you are as an organization in the payments chain, in the finance market. What kind of services are you providing to your customer to solve their challenges? And what kind of technologies does it boil down to that you require in order to set up the perfect service for your customer? Right? So it's very difficult to list all the different technologies, that a payments organization requires. It all boils down from the business vision. What kind of services do we want to offer? What are the standards we need to adhere to, and so on and so forth.
So, I mean, when we consider the payment industry, specifically when we do the PII, because they will be having the most sensitive PII they deal with.
Absolutely.
So, how how you will be adopting this security standards when we consider a cross-border payments?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, PII data, of course, you're right. And in the payment sector, you oftentimes speak about cardholder data as well. So you speak about pins, plans, track to, CVV, these kind of information. It's so fundamentally important that you have got a strong, not only data protection, but data identification and classification solution. Because if you don't understand where your assets are, where your crown jewels are, how are you going to protect them? Right? And obviously the sensitivity of them. So I think the first step, is to understand where is my data, how sensitive is the data. I need to classify my data, and then I implement the countermeasures that are needed in order to protect that data. And obviously willing to accept the risk that may occur, that may reside. So I'll give you an example in Europe. If you want me to speak about my experiences from Europe, there's this huge initiative towards point-to-point encryption. PCI point-to-point encryption. Oh. Essentially, it says that you encrypt card-sensitive data at the instance, the card is inserted into the POS terminal at the operating system layer, right? We spoke about technologies earlier. What do you need for that? You need a point-of-sale terminal that is certified, that can use what they call an SRED module, secure read and exchange of data. You can enable an SRED module, you encrypt in the operating system layer of the POS terminal. You require a PADSS certified payment application that sits either in the terminal or at the point of sale, right? You require hardware security modules in order to generate, what is known as a DAPPUT, deriving a unique key per transaction, in order to encrypt your card-sensitive data. These hardware security modules also need to be certified according to PCI PTS, right? Like I said, it all comes down to the data and the vision that the company has, the solution they want to set up, according to which you set up your technologies, according to which you protect the data that you're dealing with.
So you pointed to a place where another question came, the point came in, actually data. When we consider the point of data itself, actually, because especially when we consider this region and most of the regions, they started adopting cloud.
Yes.
So how critical is to consider the part of the data transaction, data in motion, data in all the states, actually, when they store.
Very good question.
So how do you?
Very good question.
How do you?
That's a very good question and a very big challenge, actually. The cloud service providers natively offer tools which allow you to identify and tag sensitive data, right? However, one thing to bear in mind is that cloud solutions by nature are elastic, right? You can spin up your assets, you can also spin them down depending on, how much service you're utilizing from the cloud. That makes it a lot more difficult to really understand where does my transaction data flow? What are the different components or applications that my transaction data flows through that I need to protect or view adequately? We've got this challenge as well, here in AEVI, right? It's quite a big challenge, actually. I don't really know what the perfect recipe is, but I've always tried to stick to the very fundamentals. I try to see if there are any data leak or data loss prevention solutions out there in the market that we can use, to identify and classify data. if you are in the payments market, PCI is your top priority. And obviously, if you are in the cloud and you're setting up a PCI solution, everything is very tight, everything is very closed off, So what you want to make sure is that, and this is in PCI guidelines as well, is that you know exactly where your data resides. Where is it transmitted? Where is it stored? Make sure that it's encrypted, make sure it's not in plain text, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
So, there is not a perfect recipe, to be honest. I wish I could give you the perfect answer over here. It's just all about the analysis, the identification before you then start using technologies to protect that data.
And on top of that, actually, the local regulations also will be there as a marination point.
Yes. Oh God, yes.
Perfect.
The local regulations are sometimes even more strict than the global ones.
Yeah, I know the challenge. Great. Actually, great. Actually, in fact, we got, lots of new things actually which has been shared in this chat. I must say, there are lots of new knowledge which I gained myself, and thanks to you. I hope the viewers also will be enjoying the same thing. Viewers also will be having knowledge injected in their mind after watching this session with you. Great talking with you, and hopefully, as I said, let's plan for one more session if possible. Because viewers definitely will be having a feedback. They will be asking for more sessions with you for the DevSecOps knowledge.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's been an honor. It's been an honor and a pleasure. I think what you're doing is great. To be honest, I really respect and admire you for that, because these kind of conversations are very important. They're very important to have because we all learn, we all grow. We all want to enhance our knowledge and be obviously of value to the organization that we work for or our own company. So I really admire, the platform that you have created to allow, specialists like myself to interact with one another. And I do obviously wish you all the success in the world, that you have more people that you speak with, that you gain more traction, more viewers. So you've got, obviously, I wish you all the success with the platform that you have over here.
Thank you so much. I know you have allocated at least 30 minutes from your busy schedules actually for LinkCyb for me.
It's my pleasure.
Great talking to you. Pleasure talking with you actually. Hope we will catch up soon.
Thank you. I hope so too.
And take care. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.